Maybe. Actually, yeah, I do think it does. Yep, there we go. All right.
Hey,
Cool. So we are officially streaming live on YouTube.
cool.
I'm not gonna make you reintroduce yourself. That's weird. They weren't here for the first part. That's on them.
Yeah.
So we were talking a bit before the break about your career and working in the prison. Had you had any experience with prisons before this, or
Nope.
like I know you said you were very careful about managing your expectations on this, so I was interested in that. And being that you're still pretty new, I'd really like to get your opinion after you've been there for a little while. One of the things that was most frustrating for me was that the staff never really got along.
Yeah.
There were always riffs between us as a clinical staff, like within our clinical staff itself, our administrative staff, and then the correctional staff as well. And so what I did find particularly fascinating, though, is that so the way our unit was set up, we were in charge of one unit that housed up to, it was like 70 guys that we had.
Oh, wow.
So it was a pretty big unit. It was like 2-story, like double-decker kind of thing. But the whole thing was open. And so you had like your bunks there, you had the showers there, you had the lunch tables there, you had the TV over off in the corner. And so we would also like run groups there, but everything was open.
Yep.
So
So here's what I'll say about staff relations. I've already seen quite a bit of it. So they have us, last week what we did is our shadow shifts, they called them. And they wanted us to shadow all 3 shifts, which would be morning, swing, and graveyard. But they only made us stay for a few hours graveyard instead of all night, 10 to 6. But on my unit, day shift gets along with each other. Swing shift gets along with each other. But day shift and swing shift hate each other.
okay, so there's like animosity like between the 2 shifts.
Between the 2 shifts, and nearly everyone hates the living unit manager. I shouldn't say hate, I mean they dislike. Hate is maybe too strong of a word, and it's all, at least as far as I can tell, it's all related to work and nothing really personal. The living unit manager is supports the new direction that we're going, and a lot of them, because this is one of the best units to work on, is what I've been told directly, and is what I can tell from the stories that I've heard from other units. And that's, you know, in large part because it's the intake unit and the youth are still afraid. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
they're not going to tell you to go fuck off nearly as much as on other units.
Yeah.
But so a lot of the staff have been there for a long time and prefer the old way of doing things. So they don't like the living unit manager too much. Day shift and swing shift don't like each other too much. However, in every instance that I've seen so far, they present a total united front for the youth.
That's important.
So even if
important.
even if one of this, so my role is called GLC. I can't remember if I mentioned that, group life coordinator. If the GLCs don't like a decision that the living unit manager makes in front of the youth, they will not say a word until the LUM is living unit manager, until the LUM is back in his office, and they'll go in there and talk about it in private. And that's critical. And so I'm really happy with how that has played out, at least so far. And I very much know that I haven't seen everything yet. I mean, I haven't seen a fight break out on the unit yet.
Right.
But I know that's going to happen plenty of times. So,
You know, it's interesting. I don't think I actually saw any fights break out on our unit in the entire time I was there. It happened a lot in the facility,
Oh, yeah.
just never on our unit.
See, it's happened on my unit when I was
Oh,
with
it's
the group for
like
rec
it's
and stuff
already
like
happened.
that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was just with, because they don't have to go outside for outside rec. In fact, some of them will be CTF, which means confined to floor, and they cannot leave the living unit for any reason other than medical, pretty much.
Right.
So I'll see it happen, and there's a lot that I'll see happen that I haven't seen happen yet. But my hope is that through all of it, the staff will continue to present a united front, because that is quite possibly the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the thing that like, I don't think we ever really got right. You know, like one of us would say, like, we're going to do this, and this, and, you know, we're going to give out, because so when I was there, we were trying to get away from the, like the I guess the, like the punishment approach to things, and focus more on cognitive accountability kinds of things. And like the old staff didn't like that.
Yeah.
They were like, no, it's always been. And our trainer for the state was like, how does it make sense? Okay, listen, how does it make sense that if you're disrespectful to the officer on duty, that you have to go and clean the bathrooms for 3 days? It's like, it doesn't really make sense. Like the two don't line up. Like it would be much better to work with that person to get them to write an apology of their own and then deliver it publicly.
Yeah.
Right. That would be a much better way to hold them accountable for their actions. Because, and that, like, it always made a lot of sense to me. But the older staff there were not having it. They were like, no, you can't.
Sounds very similar to my situation. Yeah. And one thing that we're having right now is a lot of staff quit during COVID. Like a lot. I mean, we're very understaffed. But what that means is that the new staff coming in, we're not stuck in the old ways. And so a large part of it very well may end up as a blessing in disguise.
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Yeah. I'd be really interested to talk to you in even just a couple of months.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was particularly fascinating is the way that, like, that environment compresses time. I don't know if you've been there long enough to really get a sense for that, but it does, like, at least for me, it did weird things with time. So it was a little bit like being in the hyperbolic time chamber for me. Like, it felt like I developed certain skills incredibly quickly because of the environment, as if, like, I had spent more time working on them than I actually had.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Now I'm thinking about it. So, what do you see happening with this? Where do you see it going?
Like, career-wise?
Career-wise, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And that, I mean, maybe if you want to extrapolate too, and think about where the system itself, or the philosophy, what you know so far about it itself.
All right. Well, I'll answer the career part of it first. I kind of expected to work this job for a few years and then move on to other things. And who knows how I'll feel in a few years, but right now I'm really enjoying this job, probably more than I've enjoyed any other job in the past. And thinking, because my thought was I work here for a few years and then move to the Oregon coast. Because ever since I was, as long as I can remember, I've wanted to live at the Oregon coast. I love it there. Well, I found out recently there are 3 different youth authority locations on the Oregon coast. There's another correctional facility, as well as 2 transitional, they call them camp, but they're like transitional programs. So kids who have left a lot of them are probably adults by the time they actually leave, because youth authority, the youth can be anywhere from 12 to 25. Well, 12 to 24, I guess, because when they turn 25, they move on to DOJ. If they commit their offense after 18, they're in the DOJ the whole time. But if they are housed in a facility before 18, they stay. If they leave, they're under a parole officer through the youth authority, and if they break parole, they're still with the youth authority. So I think the transitional programs are probably mostly adults, but now I have to consider, and very strongly consider, working in one of the programs on the coast eventually. The other thing that I, really like to do with my life is have a career in music. I come from a long line of musicians in my family, and I have a penchant for writing music. I typically use the word composing music, but I don't ever want anyone to think that means I write classical music, because I don't.
Sure.
But I'm also not, I don't sing, I don't write lyrics. What I would love to do is write soundtracks for movies or video games. I really like working for the youth authority. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. I really don't know.
So do you play instruments?
Not well. I mean, if you ask me what instrument I can play, I would say piano, guitar, bass guitar, ukulele. I was taking fiddle lessons for a while, but I'd stop those. I got my keyboard behind me. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit. But if someone comes to my apartment and they see that and ask about it, what I'm going to tell them is I am not a pianist. I'm not a keyboardist. That is there to help me compose music. Mostly, I can play 3 songs. But that, not only can I use it to write melodies and chord progressions, but I can plug it into my computer and use it as a MIDI controller, if you know what that means.
Vaguely, yeah.
Vaguely, yeah. The one instrument that I would say I do play is bass guitar. I'm a bassist.
Oh, that's
more than anything else.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
So
that's career-wise. Maybe, I don't know, maybe eventually I'll work part-time for the youth authority and part-time writing music. We'll see. As far as the department meaning the entire youth authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say what the future holds. I mean, it seems like things change relatively quickly in recent decades. And this is by all. I mean, I've met people who worked in the youth authority in the 80s until, relatively. I spoke to someone recently who worked in the 80s and then retired somewhat recently, and said that 30-ish years saw tremendous change for the better. So my hope is that will continue.
Yeah. But I mean, it's better than some of the stuff I heard. Yeah.
Yeah. Things often is 1 step or 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's hard to tell. But, compare it to, even before they built the fence, I've heard stories, because kids would run, and like I said, they're not going to get very far because they can't. At that point, they wouldn't be able to run into town.
Right.
So what they do is the CO, campus operations, would drive a car, get up next to them, and then open the door as hard as they could to knock the kid over to stop them from running. And that's what you got to do. You know what I mean? That's better than them running into the forest, and then what are they going to do?
Right.
But it's a lot better to have a fence. You know what I mean?
But yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot better to not throw kids in isolation just because they flip you off. So for a lot of stories, that too, kids would get thrown into isolation for behavioral issues, and that doesn't happen anymore.
Wow.
They get put into, it's called IU, intervention unit, and this from the sounds of it is within the last like 5 or 6 years. But the only reason they can go to intervention unit for, we call it a timeout, which is hilarious because again, very similar to preschool.
Yeah.
But they can do that, just kind of cool off, calm down. But if they're going to be in IU with about 2 exceptions, if they're going to be there overnight, it's for a behavior issue.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not a behavior issue. If they're going to be there overnight, with 2 exceptions that I know of, it is because they are an immediate threat to themselves or others. The 2 exceptions are, 1, sometimes there's no room for them to sleep on the unit, and they have to sleep in a IU room, and then in the morning they come back to the unit. The other reason is sometimes they don't want to leave. They're too afraid to go back to their unit because there is a social hierarchy amongst the youth in every unit. And there is a culture unique to every unit, and sometimes they don't want to go back. So we call that a refusal, and they stay in IU. But point being, that is another improvement. Because you see, I mean, I've seen on TV a million times prisoners say fuck you to the security guard, and they get thrown in isolation for weeks on end or whatever. And so, I hope those positive changes will continue happening, but I can't say I've been there long enough to be totally confident they will.
I'll do that real quick while I'm considering. Sometimes I like to chew on stuff before I respond.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So we're still live, but pause the podcast, so that's fine. Yeah. I mean, specifically with this, and this is actually one of the things. All right. So this is actually one of the things that I learned as I was working in the prison, is that it's better to keep quiet if you don't have anything real to say than it is to try and fill the dead air with something. And it was maybe a little intimidating, I guess, for some people, when you have 30 or 40 of these guys looking at you. You're supposed to be facilitating a group, and you pause because you can't figure out where you want how you want to construct the sentence to get to the point that you're trying to make. I don't know. I always thought that like they would respect the authenticity more than like, I guess, like an air of maybe competency even. If you're just like talking to fill air, like they can sense that that's fake.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But if you take a minute and you're just like, you just pause, and what's fascinating is that every single time I had to pause, nobody complained about it. It was all like they were cool with it. Not sure where I was going with that.
One thing they teach us at my job is not to share too much personal information.
Yes.
For a number of reasons. And they say, don't try to just fill dead air, because you're going to just end up telling some story from your life, and pretty soon the kid knows where your children go to high school.
That's even worse. That's even worse than,
So that's
That just sounded like an idiot, I guess.
And I agree that they appreciate authenticity a lot. So
yeah, I had the feeling, because I was coming in there like, I don't have a history of substance abuse. I've never spent time in prison. I'm, by all accounts, like, I got described as like a Leave It to Beaver vibe on more than one occasion while I was in there. And so, thinking about it, before I even set foot on the facility the first time, I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. Like, if I try to pretend to be anything that I'm not, like, I'm just going to get eaten alive. But at least, if I'm just like, this is who I am, then, like, even if they do end up eating me alive, I'm like okay with that, because there's no like there's a sense of full accountability in that sense with it. So that is something I do want to ask you. I learned a lot about accountability when I worked there. What is in your estimation, what is the emphasis that's put on accountability, and how is it framed for them to try and get a handle on it?
So I think the first thing that comes to mind is we're told, if we're asking the youth to do something, say please and thank you. Because we expect the youth to do that with us, we should do that with them. I think of that as accountability, at least. If we mess up, we should apologize to the youth, because whether the youth know it or not, we are their role models. Whether they like it or not, we are their role models. What they see in us, they're going to do. So if one of the youth asks me for his phone call, and 3 hours later I realize I haven't given his phone call, I'll go up to him and say, hey man, I'm so sorry. I was supposed to give you a phone call, whatever else happened. I can dial the number for you now if you like. And I think that's really important. When they see us taking that kind of accountability, they're going to end up doing the same thing. Another piece of it, I feel like this fits in with accountability, maybe not, but it's a consistency piece of it. If you come in one day and you're a total hard ass, and then the next day you come in and you're not enforcing the same rules, maybe you're letting kids do something this day that you yelled at another kid for the day before, that doesn't work. The one thing, and
if you think they're not going to notice,
they notice.
They notice everything.
They notice everything. And part of that is the survival mode. Part of that is, they are kids, and they're a lot smarter than we give them credit for. They're a lot smarter than they might seem at first. I mean, the phrase I've come to learn is they get referred to as 30-second kids in a 1-second world, meaning the things that, in my mind, those functions that I can do quickly in 1 second takes these kids 30 seconds to do. Which means the thing that takes me a minute and a half to process is going to take them like 10 minutes, right? And yet it still gets processed, even if it doesn't happen in the moment. So you might not realize it, but they're noticing everything. So the one thing they do tell us is that when you very first come in, maybe be a little more on the tough side and then lighten up. But if you come in and you're a total softie and you're letting them do whatever they want, it's going to be a lot harder to gain that authority afterwards. They say the things you're willing to put up with on the first day, you better be willing to put up with a year from now, because it's not going to change.
Yeah. So what is the program's approach to holding the youth accountable? Like, how do you hold them accountable for their behavior?
Well, it's going to depend in large part on what the behavior is. Because, they're teenagers, they get up and jump on the table.
Mm.
And we say, hey, get down. And they get down, and it's thank you, and that's the end of it. You know what I mean? If it's something like that that's being repeated over and over, what we end up doing is we call a code, and campus operations show up.
Mm.
Depending on what it is, of course. But campus operations will talk with them, you know, again, more kind of like the preschoolers, like trying to teach them that this effect, well, I mean, first of all, kid, if you fall and hit your head on that concrete floor, you're not gonna be having fun anymore.
Yeah.
But also, you know, show them how it affects other people, because they are, you know, they don't always like the staff, but they have friends there in the unit, and anything they do affects the wider unit. But they don't necessarily know that, especially not in the moment if they're a 30-second kid.
Right.
And so it's really about teaching them that side of things. If it's more serious things, I can't say I really know for sure. I mean, as long as I've been there, we haven't found any contraband on the unit or anything like that.
I mean, it's there.
Tell, but
it's there, like without a doubt.
It's there. I mean,
it's just a matter of like frequency and like how much is there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what is it? 'Cause I mean, if they bring a pencil if they can use a pencil in the day room, but if they bring it into their room, suddenly it's contraband.
Right.
But it's a pencil. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it is a big deal when they try to use it as a shank, but pencils we give them are like that big. So, but there are some units where they let them take pencils in their room, and that's not contraband. So there's a whole wide range. And so you're right, there's contraband. But yeah, so I guess I'm not totally sure about that one. One thing I see a lot is they act out in school. The teachers are great. The teachers in our school, well, I've only met a few of them, but they're amazing.
Well, I mean, I think you kind of have to be to want to take that on. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. So we're told that because we have to be in the classroom as well, they have to have some of the unit staff. But we're told that is the teacher's classroom, and it should remain as such unless we have to step in. And I see the teachers doing the same thing that I saw when I was in high school and kids were talking. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in high school. Kids are talking, and the teacher, tells them to quiet down and talks about they're disrupting the classroom, they're disrupting the other students' learning, things like that. And it's not that much different on the unit because they do care about each other. I mean, if it's a staff they've built good rapport with, they care about the staff as well. But yeah,
what do you think? What do you think that is? So you said they care about each other on the unit.
Well, not always.
So I mean, is there a general sense of camaraderie between them?
Kind of. I mean, there's an us versus them mentality. That is there. Sense of camaraderie. So we had one kid on the unit who recently went to his permanent unit, and everyone, including the staff, actually, I should say this is one thing where the staff, didn't like the way they handled this at all. Some of the staff, but no one liked this kid. And I'm not justifying any of their actions, but it was with good reason. He was a pain. And the other youth picked on him. But even in those kind of instances, I still think there is kind of an us versus them mentality where when push comes to shove, they're the youth and we're the staff, and that's what it is at the end of the day. So camaraderie is maybe too nice to use as a blanket statement.
Yeah.
But they do. They have friends there. They're friendly with each other most of the time, at least on my unit. You get a few kind of lone wolves, but it there is a sense of camaraderie. It's just not necessarily always there, I suppose.
And I had it. So side note, I mean, I like doing the late night podcasts, but I am tired by the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's like if I probably shouldn't do the heavier like things that I should focus more on like the comedy podcast. I think at the end of the night kind of thing.
Yeah.
That would be better because I have like real questions that I want to talk to you about. But the brain's not cooperating so much. I mean, the alcohol doesn't help all that much, but
No.
Anyway, I mean, it's not like any other job I think you'll ever work.
No.
It's so alien in so many ways.
Yeah.
And even though it was like one of the most frustrating jobs I've ever had, because like just with the staff specifically, like there was so much, backstabbing and, like, listen, the reason I lost my job was because of the other staff. Right. That's kind of all I'll say about it, but I've never had a job that I've enjoyed, that I've gotten like a sense of fulfillment out of, and anywhere near as close, to the way that was. I think something about like working with the same group of guys for an extended period of time, like you really get to build relationships with people, and you really get to see the impact that you specifically have through all the bullshit, because there's a bunch of bullshit.
Oh yeah.
But when I had a guy that we I think about this as like one of the most embarrassing moments that I've ever had, in my professional career. But I was running a group and I kind of said something that I shouldn't have. Like I took it a step too far. And I could tell like as soon as I said it that, he was not ready to hear that.
Yeah.
And I could feel it as I was saying it, but I pushed through it anyway. Right. So it was like all on me. And he gets up and he storms out of the group and just like, doesn't talk to anybody for the rest of the day. And I'm kind of like, I can't even fault him for that, because I went, it was just a step too far on on my part. So I actually kind of stood up for him because you're not supposed to leave group, right? You're not supposed to do that. And so they were like, you need to give him, my supervisor was talking to me and she was like, you need to give him some accountability for that, because he is not supposed to just get up and leave. I'm like, listen, I overstepped.
Yeah.
And what he chose to do was remove himself from the situation rather than cause a scene and maybe even have the facility throw a code because of him.
Right.
So if you want to give him an accountability for it, then you're going to have to do it. But I'm not going to be able to deliver that with any kind of conviction, because actually I'm kind of proud of him right now.
Yeah.
And like, she didn't like that. She did not like the insubordination.
Right.
But that's what it was. And like, I knew I wasn't going to be able to give the accountability to him, right? Because that's what we called our punishments, right? Was we were trying to move from like the I forget the word for it, but like the more punishment style to the accountability like the cognitive, like try and get the things to match up so you build the skill that you need to not recommit. But but it doesn't matter. She didn't.
But walking away from a situation that makes you mad is a very good skill to have.
Absolutely.
So, and one that at least the youth in my facility don't have most of the time.
And so the next day, and this is really like the best part of the story, is like he comes up to me and he's like, listen, I'm sorry. Like, you struck a nerve with me and I acted out and I just had to remove myself from the situation. But I thought about it, and I thought about it a lot. And actually, no, you were right. Like, you were on the money. And I just didn't want to see it. And from that day on, there was a change in him.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like those, like, you don't get that. I've never had that. Like, I worked in mental health and substance abuse for over 3 years now. And it was literally only in the prison where I had those types of experiences, where I really felt fulfilled in what I was doing and how I was working with these people. So, yeah, it's just a shame that, like, the political landscape is just so. It's just a quagmire of incompetence and.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to like put you off, because that's just where I was, you know. But it sounds like if you guys are presenting a united front, that's a really good sign. That's a really good sign. So, because
and that's not true on some of the units, from what I've heard, which is very unfortunate.
Because they immediately pick up on that too. Like, there's no way to get around it.
Well, they'll play stuff against each other all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. Find anything they can use against you, and sometimes that thing is the other staff.
Yep. Yeah, we had staff who didn't want to give out the accountabilities. So, like, imagine having 6 clinicians who are working on a unit, and 3 of them, want to give out these accountabilities, and 3 of them are like, no, I don't think they should ever be held accountable for their behaviors. What the fuck do you do with that? And our supervisor's just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just that place was wild. That place was wild.
Sounds like it.
All right. What else? Where are we on time? We started at 11. So I typically run, like, I shoot for 90 minutes. Just generally, but I leave a 2-hour time frame for, like, breaks and technical difficulties and things to get started or whatever. So, I guess I'll pause here. And, like, how are you feeling about it?
Good. Doing good. Yeah.
Feeling like you could keep going with it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I can keep going.
I'll probably switch gears.
Right.
But I did not bring my water in with me. So, let me go and grab that real quick.
All right.
Let's take 5. And then we'll
All right, sounds good.
All right. Cool.
Cool.
looks like we've had some people come and check in.
Nice.
We don't have anybody right now, I don't think, but it
Okay.
looks like we had up to 6 at one point.
Oh, nice.
That was cool.
Cool.
So, yeah, like I said, this is the whole podcasting thing is kind of brand new for me. But it's a lot of fun. I like to talk to people, and it's also something that I consider myself to be pretty bad at, which I don't know. You might not think so, but there's something about like setting up a time specifically to talk to somebody that like puts me at my best, right? So I really do feel like I'm at my best right now, and I don't know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
I don't know why this is always awkward for me, but it is always awkward. We're 420 friendly here. Like, typically just at night, because I do not like to be intoxicated during the day. But, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a little
Go
bit.
for it.
I'm a little bit high, just a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I'm taking a break though, apparently. It's a different mode to be in like the podcast. I don't know, the podcast host mode. It's different. It is actually though, it's a lot like running the groups.
Yeah.
Which is really what I like about it. And actually I think one of the reasons that I started the channel to begin with was like when I got fired, I stopped doing groups every day. And so doing the groups was do you have the opportunity to run groups where you're doing?
I will eventually. Yeah.
Okay.
They'll be, I mean, different than what like the mental health staff team does, but
Sure.
I will eventually. Yeah.
Sure. So it was definitely like, really, it was my reason for being there. It was absolutely the thing that I love to do, and I was very good at it. And I was kind of terrible at documentation, just because I didn't want to do it. And like, I haven't figured out how to get myself to do stuff that I don't really want to do. Like, it's very difficult for me to get myself to do something I don't want to do, and I don't see any like real value in. And this is also not the thing to tell your supervisor about documentation.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it and you don't see any value to it. She didn't like that.
No, I don't imagine she did.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, it's really the documentation that I think is kind of pushing me out of the field, because I understand the necessity for it, right? So when I say I don't think it has any meaning or any value, that doesn't mean I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
I understand the necessity for it. And I don't care. Like, I just don't care. And that's really not a good place to be, because you can go to jail for documentation stuff.
Oh yeah.
So you definitely do not want to be in the place where this is the thing that you care about the least, and that you're also willing to cut corners on the most. It's just not a good look. So and I've been to 3 different places now, not all prisons, but and it's the same thing. It's the same thing. I don't want to do the documentation. It doesn't even matter because my last job, it was cake. It was so you could do it in like under 10 minutes. You see, 12 different people who have 12 different notes to write. You can do all of that in under 10 minutes. And I'm just like, nah, not for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's not where you want to be, man. That's not the field for you, I guess. So I don't know. I'm actually out of work right now. I'm between jobs. Yeah. I think is what they say. Side note, this is really nice for me because I'm not actually recording, so I don't have to worry about being in like perfect podcaster mode.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hi. Hello.
Hi.
You're here too.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I don't feel too bad. You carry the podcast for like the first hour plus, so you could just like hang back and let me talk for a while. You don't have to. You can cut me off. I don't give a shit.
Right.
You should be like, shut the fuck up, dude. Stop talking. Nobody cares. And I'll be like, fuck you. But you're probably right. So also something about me that you don't know, but you will, whether you want to or not. When I'm nervous, I like just move stuff around, and I do it with purpose, and intention, like I have a plan or like it's important, but it isn't.
Yeah.
It means nothing.
Yeah, fair enough.
So there you go.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned in your Reddit post interested in talking about Buddhism as well.
Oh, you beat me to it. So I was gonna say, basically what you said. So, did I say that in the post?
Yeah.
I don't remember which post it was. I think I've done like 3 different ones, so it's hard to keep track.
List of topics you said you'd be interested in discussing. That was one of them.
What do we want to say here?
What is your interest in Buddhism?
I think as a practice, I'm interested in it. Okay, I feel like that's weird with the mic there. Anyway. As a practice. I'm interested. Why am I interested in Buddhism? Like, what's my interest in Buddhism? My interest in Buddhism is... Oh my God, there's so many reasons. Goodness. Okay. That's part of the problem. That's why I don't have an immediate answer. My interest in Buddhism is, I think it comes off as like the cool, hip religion.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was raised in almost a religious household. My parents belonged to goodness, I couldn't even tell you, but some branch of Christianity. One of the not crazy ones, but one of the not well-known ones.
Right.
At least from what I could tell. Known as Silent Unity.
Right.
And meh. Like, it was fine. I hated going to church because I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to get out of bed to go to church. I was so mad the entire time I was ever at church or Sunday school. And so I was like, nah. Just on that just like on that basis alone, I'm not in for this religious thing. But I do remember that they took a more metaphysical approach to the Bible. And so it ran more like a self-help church than anything else, which I think is kind of funny.
When you say more metaphysical, what do you mean?
I mean, the focus was on... So, like, if you're gonna, like, have an... Try and understand the Bible from, like, a literal sense, right? That's one level of analysis. So you're going to analyze it just at, like, the literal sense. It's true literally. A more metaphysical sense from that point is basically anything that uses the Bible as a starting point in an attempt to extract out essentially universal truths that you can internalize and have basically like be your guiding principles.
So that, based on the way you describe it, at least, it's a lot more common than you might think. Just outside of the United States, the idea of interpreting the Bible totally literally is very new. Started in the mid 1800s. It's called biblical literalism.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, I was a religious studies major, by the way.
Oh, were you?
I was, yeah.
Oh.
So
my wife minored in religious studies. So.
Okay. Yeah. So one of my biggest interests was early Christianity. But yeah, mid 1800s and spread outside of the United States some, but not really outside of Protestantism at all. So the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches usually do not take that literalist approach to it. And those make up the largest, well, Catholic Church is the largest church. The second largest, I believe, is the Church of England, which is the Anglican Church.
Okay.
And then Eastern Orthodox will be third. But yeah, it's really only within Protestant churches. And then some others, like the Mormons, I believe, interpret it literally. But I'm not trying to be rude, but I typically just refer to Mormonism as Protestants with extra steps. Because Joseph Smith was very... You can tell he's very influenced by the Protestants. But the point is that more metaphysical approach is a lot more common than a lot of Americans realize, at least. More common than I knew before I went to the university.
Yeah, I think I've just been like so incredibly bored with the Judeo-Christian religions. Purely because of my experiences with Sunday school and just how deeply I resented having to go to church on one of my only days off because I hated school. I didn't want to go because I didn't want to get up. It was really the same fucking thing. I never wanted to get out of bed. It still sucks, but it's I at least want to get out of bed now. So it's, it's different. But I love sleeping in though. I do love sleeping in.
And like I don't know you well enough to say necessarily if this is true or not, but I suspect that if there was something you got out of going to church, it would make it a lot easier to get up out of bed on Sunday mornings.
Yes. Now, for sure. Now. Yeah. But that's the thing. Like that's actually how I lead my life. It's like I don't do things based on what they're going to accomplish for me in the future. I do things based on like, am I going to do this? Like, am I actually going to get out of bed? Am I actually going to like be able to keep doing this? And if the answer is no, I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that then because that's dumb. I don't care where it's going to lead me. No, I know I'm not going to do it. So Yeah. And it takes, I think, a little bit of discipline to be able to sit with yourself long enough and have an honest response like that to something. Because I think we make flippant responses to things almost as our default.
Yeah.
And so, especially like for me, like I was also undiagnosed ADHD.
Yeah.
until in my 30s. I'm like, oh. And then I got medicated. I'm like, oh, this everything makes sense now.
Yeah. Yep.
It still sucks.
I know how that goes.
But
yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. This whole everything. Yeah, I understand what's happening.
Yeah.
So I'm just not gonna do it though. I'm not if I'm not gonna do something, then like why am I gonna force myself to do it when there are plenty of other things that I could be doing that I want to be doing?
Yeah.
So I guess that's me in a nutshell. But that doesn't answer your question, okay? I recognize that it doesn't actually fully answer your question.
Yeah.
It gives you an idea, though. Because I think a lot of what I articulated aligns with Buddhist teachings. And I think that's really what drew me to Buddhism itself, because I had like internalized a lot of these things naturally. And it was actually my wife who, religious study minor. So she knew about stuff, and I'm telling her about like, this is how I view the world. This is my approach to things. This is what I feel. And this is how I act. And she's like, you should look into Buddhism, because basically what you described is the Buddhist philosophy. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't for like 3 years.
Yeah.
But
fair enough.
It sort of found me too, which I think was pretty cool. Oh, I don't know what else I want to say about it. I don't like go to a temple or a church, or I don't belong to anything. I don't like, I just feel I have a good sense for the teaching itself. And I already naturally live my life. So it's more like, like if religion is a glove, it's just like the Buddhist glove was like my size. So I just picked it up and put it on. It's not like I thought about it too much. But I like that, even that one quote that gets circulated all the time that about Buddhism, like, believe nothing, no matter who has said it, not even if I have said it, if it doesn't agree with your own common sense. So it's like, obviously that's where you start from. Yeah. It's like, consider everything for you. You have these faculties of attention, intelligence, and so why are you going to defer your, why are you going to defer that to somebody else to tell you what it is, right? You still have to use those faculties to determine if this person is valid or not. So why not just use it on the thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, I've heard that pretty much same story quite a lot from people. I think it's something that happens, which is cool. And especially as Buddhism spreads more and more in the West, I think a lot of people will find that.
It's just like, intuitively, there's an intuitive sense. And that's the thing that Buddhism is pointing to. I don't know that I've ever actually talked to anybody else about this out loud. Because most of the people that I talk to, like, some people just, I haven't talked to anybody who even understands, even just like the basics of Buddhism.
Mm.
You know, let alone.
Yeah, I'm on the West Coast, and on the West Coast, Buddhism is the second largest religion after Christianity.
Oh wow!
Because of, primarily because of immigration from East Asia, and then in recent decades, more and more white Americans, as well as others, African Americans and other populations, have been converting to Buddhism, and so it has grown to become the second largest religion in this part of the country. And so it's not uncommon to run into someone. One of my coworkers at one of our trainings mentioned that he was Buddhist. I was like, oh, I didn't know that, me too. So it's probably a lot more common around here for that to happen. Are there any temples near you?
No. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
There's looked
tons of them in Oregon.
So what is it about Buddhism for you?
Long story. Long story short, though, one of the things that the Buddha said, because okay, here's my religious studies mind kicking in. Buddha lived in India about 2,500 years ago. At the time, so what is now known as Hinduism was the dominant religion. But the British actually made up the term Hinduism, so it was called something different back then. And of course, 2,500 years ago, it looked very different. Religions change over time. I mean, Buddhism in the beginning was significantly different than it is now. That's just the natural way of things. But anyway, at the time, it was really, there would be these religious teachers, and a number of disciples would coalesce around them and learn from them, and eventually become teachers themselves. And so you had a lot of people teaching a lot of very different things. There was, and still to this day, is no organization of Hinduism. In fact, in India, most Hindu temples are totally independent. And so Buddha was one teacher amongst many. And he and his followers had some enemies of other religious persuasions, including Jainism, which still exists today. But one thing that the Buddha said according to the sutras, a group of followers of another religious sect came to him and basically asked, why would we believe you over other teachers? And Buddha said, try it. Do it. Try the teachings. And if it helps, then you know it's true. And if it doesn't, do something else. And so that's what I did. And it made my life better. And so I've kept going with it.
So in what way have the teachings made your life better?
I was in a period of very, very severe mental health issues. Untreated ADHD, as we've mentioned. I was having really bad anxiety and full psychotic break. And I learned about Buddhism a lot in college prior to this. And it was during that time that I kind of started being interested in practicing Buddhism. And for one thing, I credit a large part of my mental health recovery with that. It has made me a happier person. It has made me more compassionate. But more than anything else, so I'm sure you're familiar with the term, samsara and nirvana.
Yes.
And
those two, I do want to make a point that I don't know the terminology, because I've never studied it, but I'm aware. I would like to think I'm aware of at least the important ones. So yeah, definitely
so
samsara and definitely
of course
nirvana.
is the cycle of reincarnation, and nirvana is the world of bliss where you go after you break the cycle of reincarnation. Well, the teaching in Buddhism is that samsara is nirvana, and there's not the slightest difference between the two.
Which makes sense.
Which makes
It
sense.
does. It does.
It
does.
does. And the
It
way-
doesn't make sense if you don't understand, but it does
Right.
make sense.
And there's one, I don't remember his name, but a Chinese Buddhist teacher who I think explained it perfectly, because it's all about the way we perceive things, right? The exact same reality is coming to you, but it's filtered through your senses, through your preconceptions and everything. And what you experience is samsara, when in reality, all that exists is the ultimate reality of nirvana, right?
Yes.
So this one Buddhist teacher, he said, you'll find a lot of Buddhist commentaries are set up as a question and an answer. And the question was, if samsara is nirvana, but we are in samsara trying to break out and go to nirvana, then what is the gate between the two, right? And his answer was your eyes. Because what comes, what comes in basically is nirvana, is the ultimate reality.
Dude, that's so good.
Exactly.
It's so good.
So what happened was I was speaking to where I used to live, the priest of a temple, and it's still the temple that I go to because it's not too far, and there's none in the city where I live now. But I was telling him about my mental health, and I basically asked, is this the result of some bad karma from a past life? Expecting the answer to be, yeah, it must be. Bad karma causes bad things to happen. And I asked the same question to a number of different teachers, and
this is fascinating to me. I want to make a point about it after you finish, but
yeah, he was the only one who gave me a different answer. He said, maybe it's negative karma from a past life. Who am I to say? But he said, maybe it's actually a result of good karma. So that this is what pushes you down the path of Buddhism and ultimately results in your enlightenment. Then it is the best karma out there. And
that's
those two
answer.
ideas, that and the samsara and nirvana thing, he said that, well, it was over email, but I read that and I was like, oh. And then, I don't know, 6 months later, it actually clicked in my mind what that all means. Because if samsara and nirvana is nothing more than a change of perspective, then I can do that same change of perspective with my mental illness and see it as a good thing. And you know what? That's when my symptoms stopped happening for the most part. I'm no longer on anxiety medication. I don't need it.
That's so awesome, man.
I'm no longer on antipsychotics. I don't need them.
What?
And that is rare.
That's unheard of, is what that is.
They diagnosed me with schizophrenia, but now it's gone. And I thought, well, guess I keep doing this. You know what I mean? So if you want something more specific, is that just that idea of changing perspective and how powerful that is what really drew me in.
Well, I mean, you I need a minute. Because there's a lot that's happening there. I mean, to see real results, I think is rare. But to see such monumental shifts in, I mean, I maybe I'm overstepping, but to see such monumental shifts in the quality of your own life, right? I don't even know, like, how often does that happen? Because that's really what people go to religion for. How often do they actually find it? It definitely happens.
I mean, I've seen it happen in other people, but I've also seen it fall flat so many times. You know what I mean?
Right, for sure.
And this is not the first time I've converted religions either. I was raised Christian as well. In college, I became a member of the Baha'i religion, which most people haven't even heard of.
I have not.
It not. I don't want to. Oh my god! I just kicked my cat under the table. He's fine. It just could surprise me, but it's. I don't want to sit here and like talk bad about other people's religions, but I joined this religion, and turns out the only thing I ever did was try to convert other people, and that was no good. I mean, the day I found myself walking through the neighborhood, knocking on people's doors, I was like, this is not what I signed up for. And so, and I kind of found that it was the same issue I had with Christianity, is there was very little emphasis whatsoever on personal spiritual development.
Yes.
And of course, many different flavors of Christianity, but the one I was raised with was, well, you're saved. Now go out and make sure everyone else is saved.
Oh, God.
You know, I've been told, I don't know how many times I was told, take out your phone right now and call your friends and tell them about Jesus.
Oh.
Kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Goodness.
And I was like, no. And they're like, no, take out your phone right now. Your friends might die before you can tell them about Jesus unless you do it right now. And
oh, my God. How old were you?
Teenage, high school, probably. Middle school, maybe.
Still,
yeah. So it's you know, I'm not here to try to convince anyone to join Buddhism, but what I will say is it feels to me as if religion in America doesn't have that spiritual aspect to it most of the time. And that's what really helped me. So people think of it, you just like go to church on Sunday, it's like an obligation. And if all it is an obligation, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Right. So, thinking about how to phrase this, because I took a pretty non-traditional route to understanding Buddhism. So, in my mind, okay, all right. Goodness. I don't know how other people just talk. I don't get it. I do not get how other people just say stuff. How do you do that? How do you like, because the whole thing is just a goddamn quagmire. And I'm supposed to just like forge through it? No.
That's my ADHD life.
No. Like, how much damage could I do? How much damage could I cause?
Right.
And I'm supposed to be able to do that on... It's insane. No, there's something else. There's... So my channel mostly is reactions. I think this is the 5th, maybe 6th podcast overall. So I don't have a whole lot of those. Most of the I've done, I think, like 250 reaction videos or something to this point. And what's funny is that actually I didn't even know that I could pause the recordings until about like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Like, so the first like 6 months, I'm legitimately, because the thing that that's interesting about reaction videos that I don't think I realized is that they're kind of they're one and done. Like you can't react to a song that you've already heard.
Right.
And so that puts a specific type of pressure on you. It's low stakes, but at the same time, it's not like a lot of other, like, movies. You can reshoot scenes. Like you can't go back and reshoot a reaction video.
Yeah.
With any kind of like authenticity to it. So having to like not even being able to pause and having to articulate myself on the spot was really good for me. But I still don't understand how the fuck you get through that shit. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't even remember the question now. I just remember like the because am I the only one who's like, if you say the wrong shit, you could really fuck some shit up?
Well, especially on social media.
Anyway,
I don't remember, what was I saying? I don't remember either.
Buddhism.
Something like that.
I was going to ask you a question, but formulating the question properly was much more intense than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. So you know what we're talking about? We were talking about like spirituality and the spiritual aspects of religion. I said that I think that's missing from a lot of American religion. The last thing I remember.
You came to Buddhism in a non-traditional... Oh, yes, I did say that.
Oh, yeah.
I did say that. Slurkins, thank you. Keep me honest.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess the source of the rift there was I was torn between whether to divulge more of my understanding of Buddhism or to continue through the line of inquiry that I was previously on. But I don't remember the previous line of inquiry now, so I think it's just really just the one thing, which is me telling you a little bit more about what I know about Buddhism. Most of what I learned about Buddhism, I learned from one man by the name of Alan Watts. And I've never said that out loud before in quite that way, but it is true.
Yep.
Are you familiar?
Kind of. I mean, one thing I'll tell you right off the bat is he doesn't have the best grasp on what Buddhism is, but that's mostly by virtue of the fact that he was writing in, the 70s, 60s, 70s.
So why do you think he didn't have a good grasp on what Buddhism was or is? Because
it happened several decades ago.
So he didn't have a good grasp on what Buddhism is now? What is Buddhism?
No. I mean, Westerners didn't understand it like they do now, and a lot of people still don't understand it well. But there's just a lot of misunderstandings that floated around. Now that said, I'm not terribly familiar with Alan Watts. Talked about him a bit in college, so I couldn't.
So I've listened to...
One thing I will say is he was really into Zen Buddhism.
Yes.
And
yes,
nothing wrong with Zen Buddhism, nothing against that whatsoever. But people really equate Zen Buddhism with Buddhism as a whole without realizing that Zen is one small sect of Buddhism.
Yeah. So I'm hold myself accountable here. I'm guilty of that.
Everyone is. I was for a long time too.
But I don't see necessarily the point of learning anything beyond Zen itself. Right? Because understanding Zen means understanding. And that's it. So more concepts aren't going to help you at that point.
No. I think you're right. If Zen is the best path for you. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, absolutely.
And for a lot of Westerners, it seems like it is. Now, for me, I couldn't sit and meditate for 10 minutes to save my life, let alone hours and hours like some people do. So I don't meditate ever. It's not part of.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not true. What I do, I do micro meditations. So
okay, yeah,
15 to 17 seconds.
Yeah,
really. I find is pretty much all I need.
Yeah, and you don't even have to sit to meditate. They call it just sitting. In fact, it's funny because I've been to Zen temples in America, and they'll sit you down and they'll teach you how to meditate. But if you go to a Zen temple in Japan and you say, "Hey, I want to learn to meditate," they'll point to the cushion and say, "Sit." Because that's what you're supposed to do. No, I know. But you can do it if you're walking down the street.
Yeah.
You can just walk. If you're chopping carrots for your stew, just chop carrots.
Yeah. It's not an activity. It's a state of being.
It is, and it's a state of being that I just can't get myself into. So the point that I'm
I would say that you probably do. You just don't think about it that way.
Yes, absolutely. So according to Buddhism, there are 84,000. Sometimes they say 84,000 teachings or 84,000 Dharma gates, and not a literal number. It just means like
just a
lot, right?
A fuck ton. Yeah.
And Dharma is the Buddhist teachings, right? So Dharma gates would be different ways through the Buddhist teaching that are represented by a large amount of schools of Buddhism, right? So just in Japan, because I was when I was studying Buddhism at the university, I mostly focused on Japanese Buddhism. You've got Zen, you got Nichiren, Jodoshu, Jodo Shinshu, Shingon, Tendai, Kigon, the three others that I can't remember the name of off the top of my head. And that's just in Japan alone. If you go to China, there's other schools of Buddhism. Tibet, we talk about Tibetan Buddhism. Well, there's about 6 or 7 schools of Tibetan Buddhism.
Right.
And so when going back to what I said, if all you know is Zen, that's all right if Zen is the right path for you, but it might not necessarily be. I mean, it could be, and that's great. If that's the first thing you encounter, and that's the right path for you, that's really wonderful.
It's not even, for me, it wasn't even that. It was like I encountered reality first. And then Zen was the thing that explained it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's good enough for me. I don't need because I don't look to it's not, because it's so immediate. It's right here.
It is.
You don't need concepts for this. So.
And that's great. Like, and go ahead.
It's just like, I don't even know what point I'm trying to make right now.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I don't talk about it very much. It doesn't come out all that much.
Yeah. Me personally, I love the concepts. I could do concepts all day. Turns out I'm on the opposite spectrum, so maybe that's not totally surprising. But
it's not that I have anything against the concepts.
Right. Yeah.
It's just if I'm actually really what I'm fascinated by is like Hinduism, like the it's absolutely insane. Like it's so insane. The mythology, the lore, Yeah.
Hinduism is a fun one.
But in terms of like seeking a religion for spiritual, whatever,
fulfillment, maybe,
fulfillment. I found it. I'm good.
Yeah.
And like I don't have to do anything for it.
Yeah.
It's perfect for me.
Yeah.
Definitely don't have to get out of fucking bed. But yeah, I'm definitely guilty of like when I refer to Buddhism, I'm usually referring to Zen, even though really I'm referring to the quintessential pointing of all of the teachings. But that's neither here nor there.
Well, it's the school of Buddhism that I follow gets accused a lot of being the quote unquote Christian Buddhism. And I think part of the reason is that if you look at it from the outside, it looks significantly more like Christianity than Zen Buddhism does.
Which isn't a bad thing, man.
Which isn't a bad thing. But people look at it and try to like remove it from the rest, like wider Buddhism, I guess. And then it does look very much like Christianity.
Okay, people are weird.
Well, and what happened was
especially if they call themselves Buddhists, but whatever.
Right. But in the early days of missionary work into Japan by Christians, they saw the school of Buddhism was called Jodo Shinshu. They saw it as like an in to spread Christianity because it's to them the most similar to Christianity, and maybe it is more similar than other schools. I don't know. But it didn't work, so it can't be that similar, I guess. But they really, perpetuated the idea that it's like the quote-unquote Christian Buddhism. And then you get to the 1800s with the Orientalists, if you're familiar with the term, who Westerners who studied East Asian culture.
Okay.
They don't use the term Orientalist anymore, but that was in the 1800s. That's what they were called.
Okay.
And they basically did the same thing, presented it as the Christian version of Buddhism, and it's just not. So, but when people have that image of like the monk seated in a meditation pose, that's not what they see when they see Jodo Shinshu. And again, it's fine. It's fine that people equate Zen and Buddhism. It's not like it's something to get mad or offended over, of course. But
yeah,
I just tend to explain that a lot because it's not always what you expect. And if you go to
and I think it's a worthwhile distinction to make.
Yeah.
So because again, like I said, I'm guilty of it all the time. I'm real bad about it. I legitimately should just start telling people I practice Zen when they ask me.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it is. It's not even that I'm a Buddhist. It's just I practice Zen. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Slitherkin says mindfulness. Yeah, I think so. Pretty much. BAND-MAID fan.
Well, then you can always ask the question, what kind of mindfulness are you practicing? But
yeah.
Yeah.
Mind is always full of something.
Zen mindfulness is what has become popular in the West, especially in therapy and things like that. It comes from Zen mindfulness. So,
you think so?
To answer the question, yeah, that's probably what you're thinking of.
Yes, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. It's not what I think of as mindfulness. I don't like the term mindfulness all that much.
Why? I'm curious why.
Because what is a mirror full of?
Glass.
Yes. Oh, yes. Very good. Very good. I don't like the term mindfulness because it's still what is your mind full of?
Yeah.
What is it full of? It can be full of anything. I think mindlessness for me, I think is a little bit closer to the mark.
Yeah, I can see why.
But I understand. I understand what people mean when they say mindfulness.
Right.
Yeah.
But it gets back to that idea, before, about the gate between samsara and nirvana is your eyes.
Oh,
when you empty your mind, and basically the goal of Zen Buddhism, when you empty your mind of all,
concepts.
If you can make your mind stop working, then the true ultimate reality is going to come in, and it's not going to be filtered through anything. and suddenly you've perceived nirvana, and then there you are. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I can see the mindlessness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Always chattering. Always chattering.
One Tibetan Buddhist monk came up with this term, but it's become pretty common, called as the monkey mind.
Yes.
You have to calm the monkey mind. So, or I think he called it taming the monkey mind. He wrote a book. I haven't read it, but I'm told it's a very good book.
I'm told that they're all basically the same.
All what?
All Zen, Zen books, Buddhist books.
Oh, yeah.
But they're just told from innumerable perspectives. So it goes back to the same thing. It's like Zen is fine if it's fine for you.
The 84,000 Dharma gates.
Yep.
Because the idea is that the truth is inexpressible.
Yes.
You can't speak it in words. You have to get there and experience it for yourself. So any Buddhist teaching in words, which is how they're all written down, is called compassionate means. And it's not the truth itself. It's just pointing you toward the truth. And anything that gets you closer to the truth is, from our perspective, I guess, as unenlightened beings, could be said to be true. Even if it's a lie, it gets you closer to enlightenment. That's what you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's one thing that Buddhism has over a lot of the other, religions. And it's that it's aware of its own limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really does a lot of Zen is taught through stories and dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not immediately obvious as to why it's profound. And that's the point.
Yeah.
So I think with a lot of specifically like the Western religions, it's a lot of, I tell you, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
With Buddhism, and for me, Zen specifically, it's like,
yeah. It's the finger pointing at the moon. Have you heard that? Heard that analogy?
Remind me? I'm not sure, actually.
So if the moon is the truth, then the Buddhist teaching is the finger pointing at the moon.
Yes.
Leads you to. And once you get there, you forget the finger. Because if you hold on to those teachings...
Well, actually, it's the same thing as like confusing the map for the territory, right? Mm-hmm. We have a similar idiom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I would say, I don't know if you know much about Taoism, but it's very similar in Taoism. You know much about Taoism?
I know a little bit. I actually have a copy of the Tao Te Ching, and I've read it a couple of times.
So if you open up the Tao Te Ching, the first thing you see is the way that can be spoken is not the eternal and unchanging way.
Yes. Which is really all you need to know about anything ever. You can just close it at that point.
Yeah.
If you really get it. But
but that's pretty much universally thought to be why Buddhism takes the same stance, is that it was an influence from Taoism. Which, coming from a Buddhist perspective, isn't even a problem, because if I shouldn't say new teachings, I guess. I mean, it's more nuanced than that. But if it's taking influence from outside sources, that's all right, because the teaching is that the Buddha is always with us, omnipresent, teaching and guiding us. Kind of a side note. But Taoism and Buddhism influenced each other a lot, especially Zen Buddhism, because Zen Buddhism actually started in China, called Chan in Chinese.
Yes.
But lots of influence.
It's interesting because there's some of this stuff I'm aware of, and so it's like you're talking, and I'm like, I've never heard this before, and then all of a sudden there's a chunk that, oh yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. I love that first quote from the Tao Te Ching: "The way that can be spoken of is not the eternal and unchanging way." I think the really fun part about it is that the word, because it's in ancient Chinese, the word for way, which is also Tao, so you can say the Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal and unchanging Tao. And to speak is the same word. To speak is Tao.
So the speech that can be spoken is not the eternal speech.
No, not really, because it's from context we know it's the Tao is like kind of this metaphysical concept.
Well, listen. I mean, just because we don't want to take the thing at face value and then become missionaries and martyrs for the literal interpretation of the thing doesn't mean that like a literal interpretation can't be insightful.
Right. Yeah. But it's I think the more perhaps if you want to get an even more literal way, because it's the way that can be spoken of, but way and spoken is the same word. Way is in path, like the way you go, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the path that you can go down is not the eternal and unchanging path. Talking about following the way that you can follow is not the eternal and unchanging way. All those are like perfectly good translations of that first verse there. And I think that's super interesting.
Because I read the Bhagavad Gita as well, and I felt like these things, they just say the same thing, and really it's like, God, it's been a while since I read the Bhagavad Gita, but
yeah,
it was all like the same level of incomprehensibility to me at the time. No matter what was said, but I still think about it all the time. So I don't know. I mean, I don't put a whole lot of time into learning scriptures or texts or like I said,
just for fun.
I know most of what I know about Zen I learned from Alan Watts, who was a Zen practitioner. So you can learn a lot about Zen just by being around somebody who practices it.
Oh yeah.
And since there's nobody who practices it around me, like YouTube was the only other place to find it. But like hundreds, maybe even thousands of hours I've spent listening to lectures and things like that. But not a whole lot else. At a certain point, it just became about, like, I liked his voice. And I don't know. I haven't listened to any of that stuff in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, these days there's a lot that is online now since COVID hit. People started, entire services were held over Zoom or YouTube Live that are archived online. So there's a lot of resources out there.
What do I want to ask you? I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Zen has a fascination, I think, with koans. Is the rest of Buddhism like that?
No.
Okay.
Koans are very specific to Zen.
Okay.
Occasionally, I mean, you'll hear some references to them in other schools of Buddhism, but no, it's pretty unique to Zen.
Mm. One of the things that I heard that I and you know what, I'm just gonna say this now. I'm running out of gas, so this is more than
No
just
worries.
like, yeah, I'm legitimately out of steam at this point. But I still have some things that I want to ask.
All right.
Damn it! Where'd that go? I had it. It was right there. I thought it would be fine if I made the point. Do that real quick. So I had asked you if koans were, something specific to Zen, and so they don't really present in other areas of Buddhism. How is it? How do you? What is the pointings? What are the pointings like?
Pointings, are you referring back to like the finger pointing at the moon?
Yeah.
All right, give me 1 second. This is just one example, but this, you see that?
Yes.
This is the statue that takes the center place on my altar.
Okay.
Because I have in the Japanese tradition, it's very common to have a home altar, and you do practices in front of the altar. This is meant to be the Buddha, naturally. But this is not something that I should grasp onto, because this in and of itself is not ultimate reality, right?
Right.
I mean, it is in so much as everything is.
Right.
But that's kind of the point. If I take this, exactly, if I take this specifically and I hold on to this with all my strength, then all I have is a gold-plated statue, and that's not going to get me anywhere.
Yes.
But everything about this is supposed to teach you something, right? So we have, well, part of the problem is I don't know all the symbology necessarily, but here on the bottom is a lotus flower. See that? Lotus flower is a very common metaphor in Buddhism, because they take so much water to grow that they typically grow out of the mud. But when they grow up out of the mud and they bloom, and it's a clean, pure, quote unquote, flower, right? And the idea is that that is what we're supposed to be doing with our minds as they come out of all the mud and bloom into an enlightened mind. Is a lotus flower going to help me in real life? No.
Right.
Other things like, well, there's all kinds of stuff like the, well, I don't know, you probably can't see this when it's a little bit. The bump on top of the Buddha's head, you see in a lot of statues. That's not hair, by the way. A lot of people, myself included, for a long time, assume that's hair. But the idea is that the Buddha possesses a superior knowledge and wisdom, so there's a bump on the top of his head. He has like a big brain, which is hilarious.
That is hilarious.
Things like that. Here, give me 1 more second. So in Zen, koans are very common. In other forms of Buddhism, there are the sutras. You see? Yeah. These are said to be the words of the Buddha, but just like the koans, they are a finger pointing to the moon. I can't, if I'm, okay, this one, it doesn't matter, it's not, I'm going to read it to you, but there's 3 sutras all in this one book. And the second one tells a story about this king in ancient India, king and queen, and their son kill the king. I'm gonna have to read it again, I guess. I think he kills the king and imprisons the queen, so his mom and dad. And the queen is there, and she prays to the Buddha, and he miraculously appears in her jail cell. But I'm not, for one thing, I'm not taking that as literal because of, you know, the danger of grasping at the finger instead of the moon.
What do you think? What do you think about this? One of the things that I've heard that has been particularly interesting to me about Buddhism is that Buddha isn't just the person. Buddha is a title given to someone who has awakened to their Buddha nature.
Yeah.
And so they say that all beings have the seed of Buddha within them.
Yep.
So in this story, if we think about it in that context, Buddha appearing before her would be her own enlightenment. I think moksha.
Moksha. No, not, at least not in this case, because it's made very clear that the queen, Vaidehi is her name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
No, it's okay.
I don't know if I've ever heard it pronounced out loud or just read it, but she, you know, it's made very clear that she is.
Listen, neither of us are experts, so it's fine.
Fair enough. Fair enough. But it's made very clear that she is not enlightened. And then the question, you know, there's a question of if you already have your Buddha nature within you, are you not already enlightened and just don't realize it? And to that, I would say, yes, you don't realize it. That's why you're not enlightened yet, because of the whole perspective thing, right? So in that sense, I would say, no, it's not just her own Buddha nature. For one thing, this story just didn't happen. I mean, it would be written in the history books if it did. You know what I mean? So there's no reason to think the Buddha just miraculously appeared in her jail cell. Where was I going with this? But the other thing you have to realize, where was I going with this? I'm sorry.
You're good.
I got lost. Well, for one thing, you know, even if we're coming at this from a purely historical academic perspective, the Buddha was a real person. And we know this, just like Jesus was a real person. But according to Buddhism, he became enlightened, fully enlightened, we say the Buddha because he is the founder of Buddhism, but he became a Buddha, just like everyone ultimately will according to the teachings. In Buddhism, there's the idea of the 3 Buddha bodies, which gets a little complicated, but there's one of them is called the manifestation body, and is how a Buddha manifests in the world. Like, for example, as a human being named Shakyamuni in India. But the Buddha also manifests as the teachings themselves. So I could very accurately state that what I'm holding right now is quite literally the Buddha.
The Buddha.
But I wouldn't say that it's my own Buddha nature that I'm reading out of a book. You know what I mean?
I would.
That said, you know, there are different schools of Buddhism, and that's something that in my school of Buddhism, it's pretty heavily emphasized to realize that you are an unenlightened being. And so when we talk about Buddha nature, we say that the Buddha nature, the very common phrase is Buddha nature is Tathagata, and Tathagata is just another word for saying Buddha. Which you would hear, I mean, I'm sure you would hear, and this is not inaccurate or incorrect or anything, you would hear that and say that, well, then the Buddha is within me. I am the Buddha, right? Whereas in my school of Buddhism, it's very emphasized to see yourself and the Buddha is kind of separate. Not separate in terms of Buddha's not here and we're not kind of at one with each other, but I am an unenlightened being, and that is very far
So
removed in status from
yeah.
an enlightened Buddha. So when we say that Buddha nature is Tathagata, what we're really saying is it's by the Buddha's power that we reach enlightenment, which is kind of unique compared to other schools of Buddhism.
You know, I think that's where maybe where it gets its reputation for having the Christian flair to it.
Absolutely. But you also hear what I said earlier about samsara is nirvana. Oh, because the how does it? Because I said the quote is Buddha nature is Tathagata. Forget exactly how the whole quote goes. Something along the lines of nirvana is Buddha nature, so that the Buddha and nirvana are equated with each other. And that happens a lot in the Buddhist teachings. Because one of the other two Buddha bodies is the Dharma body, which is nirvana, is ultimate reality itself. And in the teachings of my school of Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu, you see the phrase samsara is nirvana all the time.
Yeah.
And in the Japanese tradition, I don't know if you've seen this, called gasho, where you put your palms together. Your left hand represents samsara, your right hand represents nirvana coming together. Your left hand also represents yourself, and your right hand, the Buddha, coming together as one. But I think the emphasis, I guess I'd say the way I understand it, at least, is the reason we place our emphasis on the separation between ourselves as online beings and the Buddha is, how are you going to bring them together if they're not separate in the first place? You know what I mean? We need to kind of recognize where we're at now before we reach this place, and that's kind of the whole point. So it is very unique.
It is.
In Zen Buddhism, you look into your mind and you see the Buddha. We're taught to look into our mind and see foolish beings, as it's phrased. But
you know, and it's like there's a lot of value in that for a lot of people, because if you Zen can be massively confusing to people who are like, what do you mean I'm already enlightened? That doesn't help me. What do you mean? Right. And so you know, me personally I was like, I don't understand that. It you know, I didn't get it right away, but I knew that like there was something happening. So it didn't deter me. I think it actually just made me more interested in it. But
it also goes back to what you're saying, or what we were talking about the different Dharma gates and everything, how these two basically opposite perspectives both lead people toward enlightenment.
Right, toward the same destination.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
It is, I mean, fascinating to see this, the duality in everything. And I know that word has been kind of like hijacked, I think. But when I use duality, I mean the sense of polarization. So what I think is particularly interesting about the idea of duality is that you have a North Pole and a South Pole, right? That represents a duality. But it's one magnet. That has both of those. And I think that piece is missed when people talk about duality. Is that the whole thing goes together. I don't know how I got on that, but there you go.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing when viewed from one perspective might be, well, I should say, you know, if you're looking from one perspective, you might see two things, but then you look from another perspective and realize they're actually one.
Right.
And that's why in Buddhism, you might sometimes hear the phrase, not one, not two, because
I love that.
Ultimately, I know, I love this too. So if you think about it, people often say, you know, everything is all one, it's all one thing. And that's, for a lot of people, again, that's a good way to think about it. But
it's so easy to turn that into and to just turn that into an idol and then let that be like, oh, it's, but whatever. It's okay. It's fine.
So in Buddhism, though, what part of the idea is that thing, like categories between things start to break down, so that one thing you'll often hear is if you have a chair, right? Here's my chair. It's one chair, right? But then if you look, you can see it. If you look at it, these different pieces, like these, if I had a screwdriver to unscrew everything, these would come apart.
Right.
It's my cat.
I
could take the screws out. I could take the legs off. I could take the seat off, and then it's not a chair anymore. It's just separate things, right?
Right.
But if I put it back together, those are still separate things.
Yes.
But suddenly it's one chair, right? Same thing. You actually hear this with sometimes you hear the example with cats. You're looking at a cat. Where do I end and the cat begins?
I love that question.
Because I know. Because the categories between myself and others, in this case, my cat, start to break down. But if you think about it, if everything is all one, you just create another category. Sure, you put everything into that one category, but it's still a category.
It's still a category, yeah.
You could say everything that exists is in that category, so why does it matter? Well, now you've created categories between what exists and what does not exist. And even that starts to break down in Buddhism. So that's where you hear not one, not two. And you can keep going forever because numbers never end. But I like that one. That one's cool.
Yeah, I like that one too.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting. What's up?
I was going to say, pretty soon I'm going to have to log off and get ready for bed.
Yeah, me too. I guess we'll wrap up.
Okay.
I do want to make this last point though. That I had a stint for I guess about 1.5 years where I was really interested in like math and physics. So I took a bunch of. I was actually in a chemistry with math concentration major for a little while there. And I didn't realize, now that I think about it, it seems pretty obvious, but any measurement that any of our scientific instruments ever take always have some element of rounding in them. No measurement has ever been completely precise. And no measurement ever will be completely precise because there are an infinite number of numbers. And so to realize that the physical world is much trickier to pin down than it seems at first glance. I think that speaks to the idea that, well, the chair is a chair as long as it's functioning as a chair.
Right, exactly.
That's what makes it a chair. So it's
So I'll say one more thing. I know I said I was gonna log off, but in Taoism is also super interesting to me. There's the Tao Te Ching. There's another text called the Zhuangzi. So it was written by a guy named Zhuangzi.
Yeah,
I like it. I prefer it over the Tao Te Ching personally. A few parts of it where you read it and it's like reading a koan. But one thing, he asked the question, what makes a road? And keeping in mind that people in ancient China didn't drive, they walked. But he said, what makes a road? And he says, people walking on it. He says, actually first, I think I'm getting the order mixed up. I think first he says, what makes something so? So meaning like, how it is, what makes it so? He says, making it so makes it so. And then he says, a road is made by people walking on it.
Yes.
And I think that's so true. I mean, if I had never seen a chair before in my life, and this is hard to imagine because we see chairs all our lives, but if I walked up to this, I'm not going to say this is a chair. I'm going to say, what the fuck is that?
Right.
I'm not going to know what to do with it. I'm not going to use it as a chair probably unless I happen to sit on it and think, this is kind of comfy. This chair
maybe.
comfy,
I mean,
though,
yeah. But you wouldn't know. You wouldn't have that preconceived notion. Yeah.
The preconceived notion, exactly. Yeah. And then if I, instead of sitting on it, if I decided to take it apart instead, then where does that leave me?
Right.
So, yeah. Super interesting.
All right, man.
All right. Yeah.
Well, that's gonna do it. I appreciate you hanging out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun.
So definitely be willing to down to talk again. Like I said, I definitely want to like after you've had a little bit more time in the facility.
Yeah.
Get your thoughts on that.
Cool.
But I'm always down to talk about like the Buddhist stuff too. So
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Have a good night, dude.
All right. You too.
All right. Take care.
You too.
All right. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Okay, good night. I love you.